Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Medz Mamas. Today, granddaughter Colette Zabo honors her maternal grandmother, Nina. From growing up in Iran to picking wild cherries in Central Park, Colette shares the adventures of her grandmother. Welcome, Colette.
Thank you, Anoush. It's an honor. We have been in the United States since '77. My grandmother, we are Armenians from Iran, and we've been there for generations. My grandmother was born in the north in an area called Mazandaran. And her mother died when my grandmother was very young, and she was very, very close to her father. She was Nina Mama, as we call her, was very interested in nature and medicine and healing. But her father forbid her from going to medical school for some reason. So she went down the traditional road for a young lady of that era, met my grandfather, fell in love, got married, and established a family. We Armenians are Christians, of course, and we were welcome to live in Iran for many generations. Once the government changed, it became Muslim. My parents felt that it was no longer safe for us to live there, so we moved to the United States in 1977 when I was 7. I've essentially grown up here, but my grandmother's influence has always been present. Maybe more so for me than my sister, because my sister was only a year old when we came here, but she had a big impact on us. She was my mom's mom. She lived with us. She was the matriarch of the family, and she helped keep traditions alive with her stories and her cooking and instilling basic values of goodness in all of us. A big appreciation for nature. We had a fairly big earthquakes are common in California. They're still scary, but we're somewhat used to them. There was an earthquake in the summertime, I remember, and I was still asleep. Her sister was visiting from New York. They would trade visiting each other over the summer. My grandmother's sister lived in Manhattan, and sometimes my grandmother would go to New York for the summer to visit her sister Violette, or Aunt Violette would visit us. And Violette happened to be visiting us. So I gave her my bed, and I was sleeping on the ground in the room. And next thing I know, my grandmother walks in with something in her palms she's holding. And she says, Coco, she nicknamed me Coco. Coco, look.
Oh.
I said, what is it, Grandma? I woke up. I'm like, what is it, Grandma? We had just had an earthquake. And a baby bird had fallen out of its nest, and I don't even know how my grandmother knew it was there and went and rescued it. And we ended up raising that little bird.
Oh.
So she loved nature. She loved all creatures. She did everything she could to take care of nature around her. She had a green thumb. She could make anything grow. Beautiful garden, and she loved planting things that were unusual and rare for our climate here, whatever she could get a hold of. She was a very special person. Grandmothers usually are very, very special.
That's amazing. You know, not that many people have their grandmothers live with them these days, but for Armenians, it is something that you do see, and you still see today. But in general, like here in America, you don't always see that. So it's really heartwarming, and so you must have so many stories and so many great memories to share. What were some of the stories she shared with you about her childhood, or any stories?
I never forget the one about the night that her father was passing away. So like I said, my grandmother was very, very kind and understanding of the nature around her and the creatures. She never assumed that any creature was inferior to her. And I remember my grandmother telling me how astounding it was that she knew her father was on his deathbed and he was about to cry. And she told me that his horse shed tears. And I think that she understood more than any of us really do that just because there's a language barrier between us and other creatures, they still have a sense of love. There's a lot we don't know about them. A social structure, they have affection, they have emotion, they have. They're a lot more complex than some of us give them credit for. Mm-hmm. And I think my grandmother really understood that from a very, very young age. Mm-hmm. The story about her father's horse crying when he was dying is just something that's stuck with me. I'm now 52, and I think about it every single day. There's a population of people from India. They are Jains. That's their religion. One of my very close girlfriends, she's Jain, and she's taught me that every element of life deserves respect and has a right to life, including the tiniest ant that we trample on without even realizing. It's that kind of respect for nature that I think made my grandmother such a special person. And she commanded respect. She was the matriarch of our family, and she commanded so much respect just because of the person she was. She was quite a character. She lived with us. She had her own room, and she had a closet full of the most unusual things. We would be out shopping, and she'd be like, no, don't waste your money. I have that. Like, why do you have this, Grandma? And we'd go home, and she'd go into her closet, and she had this grabby thing. She'd grab something off the top shelf or hanging from hooks. I mean, that closet was, I wish I had, back then there were no cell phones with cameras on them. I wish we had that just to record her sitting on the ground trying to do inventory of the most ridiculous things she had in there. My father, for example, he would be restoring cars. My father is quite handy. But, sometimes, Dad would need something unusual, like the pull on a light bulb. You know those light bulbs, they have that chain thing that you pull and it turns the light on and off?
I have one behind me.
Yeah. She had spares. I mean, this is an exaggeration, but she really did have things like that you'd be like, why do you have this? And she was always like, well, it's on sale. It's probably going to come in handy. I'll just buy it, put it in the closet, and as soon as my son-in-law wants it, I'll have it. And she did. It was hilarious. She had everything in that closet. She was such a character. She used to, like I said, she used to visit her sister in New York, or her sister would visit us here. And my grandmother loved Manhattan. It was such an adventurous place for her. And she was very, she was very confident, and she liked exploring other cultures and other people. She'd go into Harlem, and, back then everybody was like, no, you got to stay out of Harlem. That's not your territory and that kind of thing. My grandmother was like, they're people just like us, and I want to go visit. I want to go see them. I want to go to their shops, their eateries. I want to, she was very adventurous and very loving of people in general. She never said, oh, this person's from a different culture, speaks a different language. I don't want to have anything to do with that person. She was the opposite. She wanted to know more. She wanted to make friends, and and I think a lot of that she did through food, exchanging recipes, offering food. There are some basic things, basic acts of kindness that I think that humans just, sometimes we forget we're all really the same, and I think she understood that, and that's why she was so loved. She happened to be going through Central Park one day. This is a long time ago. This is like in the 80s. And, my grandmother is from that generation of foragers. That's what they did. So she knew what she was looking for. And she found some berries on a bush, and she started picking them. And her sister's like, cut it out. You can't do that. We're in Central Park. And she's like, oh, don't be ridiculous. These are cornelian cherries. Of course, back then we didn't know their name was cornelian cherries. Nobody knew what they were. They looked like cherries, but they're kind of like, what do you call them? Rose hips, I suppose. Anyway, so there she is picking away at this bush. And policeman on horseback strolls by and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, hello, officer. I'm just picking some cherries." And he's like, "Cherries? Really? Cherries on a bush? Really?" And she's like, "Yeah. I wouldn't eat it like this, but, you should take a handful home and add some sugar and boil it in some water, a syrup, and make it into a jam." And she knew the medicinal properties. It's wonderful if you have a cold and a cough. It soothes your cough. Plus, it's delicious. So she totally charmed this police officer. He was completely captivated. He's like, all right, yeah, okay, I'll take some home. Thank you for picking them. Yeah. By the way, what are these things called? And she was like, I don't know what they're called in English, I don't know what they're called. In Farsi, they were called zoalakhte, but in English back then, we didn't know the name of these things. So she thinks for a little while, and she goes, "Well, I suppose they're called Djavadian cherries." And he says, "Djavadian, I've never heard of that. How interesting. Thank you so much." And so he takes a good handful. Off he goes with his Djavadian cherries. And her sister standing there shaking her head. Djavad was their family name. They're Baghdassarian, but Djavad was like, I think some generations had to have a Persian name, a Persian alias. So we used to call my grandmother Djavad as a joke, sometimes General Djavad or whatever. So she was quite a character.
I love the story. I think it really connects with everything that you do. I first learned of you through Instagram, of all places, as Coco in the kitchen, and just lured into all of the divine dishes and the images, and you're constantly making something wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, and now I can see these connections. So it's wonderful that it's tied in with your Medz Mama.
Yeah, so a lot of the recipes are my grandmother's and my mother's and my dad's mom, my Nina Mama's Nazuk recipe. Nazuk is a quintessential Armenian pastry, as you know. Streusel, stuffed rolls of pastry that are incredible. The closest thing I can say is the Jewish rugula is similar. Nina Mama's Nazuk recipe is on my blog. She also made something, I haven't posted the recipe. It's a simple nut toffee, a nut brittle, that's it. Almond brittle. She used to do it with sesame seeds or almonds. And it's a simple butter toffee recipe that's, in America we always add the baking soda at the end to make it froth up. But her recipe didn't call for baking soda, and it's delicious. I probably should share that. It's so simple and so good, especially with the holidays coming. It would make a perfect
divine.
hostess. Yeah, It's really easy. Very fattening, unfortunately, but that's why it's so good.
Yeah. Well, if your Nina Mama were here amongst us, what would you want to say to her?
I still dream about her every now and then. It's very interesting. She died nearly 30 years ago now, in 96. And I miss her every single day. She raised me because both my parents were young and working. My mother was a bank manager. My father was an executive in a large insurance company. They had me 2 years after they got married. They were high school sweethearts, and their mothers were friends. So we were a very closely knit family. And so I think what I'd want to say is I'm sorry for all the hell I put her through. When I was a kid, and she was trying to, bring me up and, go shopping every day. Back then, that's what the ladies did, is they went shopping for fresh food every single day. They went to the butcher. They went to, everything was distinct, right? Back then, we didn't have supermarkets. Not real. I mean, we did, but one particular supermarket apparently had nicknamed me the Earthquake, because when I walked in, I just grabbed stuff off the shelf out of other people's shopping carts, and my poor grandmother was so patient with me. I think I would want to apologize for all the hell I put her through. One day I got really upset, apparently, and opened the door and walked out. she was busy cooking something, and I was such a bad kid, such a bad kid. But I think I would want to apologize for putting her through so much and tell her how much I love her. You know, when she passed away, I asked my mom, I go, Mom, I don't think I told her enough that I don't think I told her. I don't think she knew I loved her. And you feel guilty sometimes when you lose someone you really love. Mm-hmm. And my mother said, of course she knew you loved her. You told her all the time, and spending time with her, she knew. Mm-hmm. You always had time for her. You always made time for her. She knew you loved her. But,
yeah. Well, she's made such a big impact on your life and yours on her, your life on hers as well, I'm sure, and that closeness. So all those moments add up to a whole lot of love. So it's just heartwarming to hear all of the feelings that you have for your Medz Mama Nina. It's just lovely, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing her and yourself with our listeners of the Medz Mamas. So thank you.
Thank
Colette.
you thank you, Anoush John. This podcast is so valuable, and you take so much time and effort into putting these interviews together, and it's so important for the younger generations to see what beautiful heritage we have, and the stories are just there's things that we would miss if you weren't doing this for us. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's very, very enjoyable. It's a treasure, and I'm so lucky that I stumbled on you on Instagram.
Same here. Hachol. All right. Peace.
Peace. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening. You can find Colette at Coco in the Kitchen on Instagram. Special thanks to sound designer and musician Aris Beakley for creating the beautiful music for Season 2. You can find Aris at Noiship on Instagram. To stay updated on new episodes, please give us a follow. And if you know an incredible Medz Mama, you can contact us through Instagram at TheMedzMamas or go to TheMedzMamas.com.